The truth no one saw in Britney Spears' Collapse wasn't just about a single night or a single picture that went viral. It was something deeper, something building for years while the world kept clapping. To most people, it looked like chaos: the shaved head, the paparazzi swarms, the angry headlines. But behind it was a story no one wanted to slow down and see. Britney was never allowed to simply be a person. From the moment she was young, she became an image. Every smile, every song, every move was packaged into perfection. And for a while, it worked. The world adored her. But adoration isn't the same as understanding. The cheers that made her a star also drowned out the quiet voice inside her. If you look closely at those years, you can see the cracks forming. The interviews where her sweetness sounded rehearsed. The photos where her eyes told a different story than her smile. Each moment of perfection carried a hidden cost, and piece by piece, the person beneath the image began to disappear. And when the collapse finally came, it wasn't just a breakdown. It was the mirror of everything that had been done to her. The price of being watched, owned, and controlled. What looked sudden was actually years in the making, a life shaped more by expectation than by choice. Those expectations began early. Long before Britney was the world's biggest pop star, she was already being trained to be flawless. From talent shows to auditions, she learned that her value came from how perfectly she could perform. By the time Baby One More Time hit, she wasn't just a girl chasing her dream, she was the result of a machine that had been shaping her for years. That machine didn't only polish her talent, it built a brand. Every detail mattered: her voice, her look, her interviews, her dance moves. The world saw her as effortless, but the truth was much harder. Every performance took hours of preparation. Every smile was expected to shine. There was no space for mistakes, no room to simply be herself. Even the smallest crack in her image could be treated as failure. Psychologists call this kind of life a performer's identity. It means people don't love you for who you are. They love you for how well you play the role. For Britney, this began before she was even an adult. Each headline, each award, each cheer from the audience sent the same message: you are valuable only when you are flawless. The real Britney, the one who got nervous, tired, or uncertain, was slowly pushed further into the shadows. And over time, the line between the person and the performance blurred. The small-town girl from Louisiana began to disappear behind the superstar Britney Spears. At first, that mix of image and self felt like power. Fame gave her attention, energy, and a sense of control. But a life built only on performance is fragile. Because when the applause fades, or when the performance slips, it feels like love fades too. That was the hidden cost of Britney's rise. The same cheers that made her famous also trapped her in a role she could never step away from. And that role soon became something even more dangerous: a mask. Carl Jung called it the persona, the face we wear so the world will accept us. For Britney, this wasn't a choice. The mask was painted on her, layer by layer, and every time she stepped into the spotlight, it was reinforced. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, the media world was exploding. Music videos on MTV, glossy magazine covers, late-night talk shows, all of them wanted a very specific kind of Britney. Sweet but sexy, innocent but grown up, polished but never too real. Whenever she delivered that mask, the rewards came instantly. The applause grew louder, the headlines glowed brighter, the record sales soared. But the mask came with a cost. Whenever Britney let her real self slip through, even for a moment, the backlash was instant. A sigh of frustration in an interview, a look of exhaustion after a show, even a glance that didn't match the perfect smile. It was all twisted into gossip. The public didn't want Britney the human being. They wanted Britney Spears, the brand. And slowly, the brand became heavier than the person carrying it. That's the danger of a persona. At first, it seems like protection, a mask to survive under the lights. But the longer you wear it, the more it hardens. It stops being a tool and starts becoming a prison. Britney's smile, once a sign of joy, turned into an expectation. Her interviews, once chances to connect, became scripted performances. Even mistakes had to look polished enough to fit the act. And the media kept the mask in place. Tabloids fought for every picture, talk show hosts joked about her personal life, and the early internet made every rumor impossible to escape. Britney wasn't just a performer anymore. She was a reflection bouncing across millions of screens, consumed by strangers who never stopped to ask how much weight the mask carried. This wasn't yet the collapse, but it was the cage tightening. The moment her fight stopped being about chasing success and started being about holding on to herself while the mask refused to come off. And then the cage grew tighter. By the mid-2000s, fame had shifted into something darker. It wasn't just concerts and interviews anymore. It was a chase, with cameras waiting outside every door. Britney wasn't living life. She was living inside a spotlight that never turned off. The paparazzi followed her everywhere: grocery stores, gas stations, restaurants, even when she was driving with her kids. Dozens of cameras would swarm her car, shouting her name, blinding her with flashes. There was no pause button, no chance to step away and be unseen. Every step became a picture to be sold, every look a headline. And the cruel truth was that the more the world consumed her pain, the more valuable those pictures became. This kind of life creates something psychologists call self-alienation. It means you start living as if someone is always watching, even when you're alone. Your private moments no longer feel private. Your choices feel staged because you know they'll be judged by strangers tomorrow. For Britney, this meant she couldn't just take a breath without wondering how it might look on the cover of a magazine. The cracks in her spirit grew wider during these years. The smile she had once carried so easily now looked forced. The exhaustion on her face wasn't hidden anymore. Even her attempts to live normally, to go out with friends, to spend time with her children, became another circus. The very idea of normal life was stolen from her, and slowly the pressure built. Imagine living every second as if the world was peeking through your window. Imagine not knowing if the person beside you was a friend or a photographer in disguise. That kind of tension doesn't explode right away. It builds, layer after layer, until one day the weight is too much. This still wasn't the collapse everyone remembers, but it was the stage being set. Britney wasn't just famous anymore. She was trapped in visibility, a human being forced to perform not just on stage, but in every corner of her life. The weight of that spotlight couldn't last forever. And when it finally cracked, the world didn't see pressure giving way. They saw a show. They saw a headline. They saw Britney losing her mind. The images are unforgettable. Britney shaving her head in a salon, surrounded by flashing cameras. Britney storming a paparazzo's car with an umbrella. Britney crying in the back seat while strangers shouted her name. To the outside world, it looked like chaos. But inside, it was something closer to rebellion. After so many years of being controlled by managers, by contracts, by cameras, she grabbed at the only control she could find. If they wanted her hair perfect, she cut it off. If they wanted her to smile, she showed them her anger. Psychologists call this reactive autonomy. When someone who's been controlled for too long pushes back, even if it looks self-destructive. It wasn't madness, it was a scream for freedom. But instead of compassion, the world laughed. Talk show hosts turned her pain into punchlines. Magazines sold her collapse on glossy covers. Even people who loved her music began treating her life like entertainment. And then came the next chapter, the one that was supposed to be help, the conservatorship. On paper, it was protection. It was meant to save her from herself, to stabilize her career, to take care of her children. But in practice, it became another prison. For over a decade, Britney lost the right to make the most basic choices about her life. Her money, her health, her relationships, all placed under the control of others. The irony is almost cruel. A girl who had been controlled since childhood fought back in the only way she knew how. And the punishment was even tighter control. What looked like freedom in those moments of shaved hair and rage was met with the sharpest loss of freedom imaginable. And so the collapse wasn't just a breakdown. It was the moment when rebellion turned into captivity. Britney's fight for herself was recast as proof she couldn't be trusted with her own life. And from then on, her story wasn't just about fame. It was about power. What happened next wasn't just control. It was redefinition. Britney's defiance, the shaved head, the umbrella, wasn't seen as a scream for freedom. It was branded as madness. Institutions stepped in not to understand, but to label. And once that label stuck, it gave courts and doctors the language to cage her life in rules. What could have been recognized as suffering was reframed as illness. This is where psychology and history help explain what happened. Sigmund Freud once said that every person lives between two forces: the id, which wants raw freedom and desire, and the superego, which represents rules and control. Most people balance these forces inside themselves, but when the outside world takes over that balance, through courts, doctors, and laws, freedom itself gets pathologized. Britney's desire to resist became labeled as dangerous. Her id was treated as sickness, and the superego of society was placed over her life like a cage. The French philosopher Michel Foucault warned about this kind of system. He studied how institutions, hospitals, prisons, courts, use the language of help to hide what is really control. Madness, he said, is often just another word for what makes people uncomfortable. And when it comes to women, especially powerful women, that label has been used for centuries to silence them. For Britney, shaving her head wasn't insanity, it was refusal. But once institutions called it madness, the refusal no longer counted as human, it counted as disorder. That's the weaponization of power, turning rebellion into illness, so control looks like compassion. And in Britney's case, it worked for more than a decade. Every attempt to speak up, to say she wanted her life back, was twisted as proof she still wasn't well. The system didn't just control her money or career, it controlled the story of who she was allowed to be. Britney's collapse wasn't only a private tragedy, it was a cultural lesson about how we deal with disorder. When a man breaks down, he's called a tortured genius. When a woman breaks down, she's called crazy. And once that label sticks, it gives society permission to take her freedom away. For years, Britney's voice had been silenced by the system that controlled her. But something unexpected happened. The world began to notice. The same public that once turned away from her pain began, slowly, to face it. What had once been sold as entertainment started looking more like cruelty. And that shift gave birth to a movement, the Free Britney movement. At first, it was small. Fans holding up signs outside court hearings. A few voices online raising questions about why a grown woman could headline concerts but not sign her own checks. But those small voices grew louder. Strangers who had once consumed her breakdown like a tabloid show were now demanding her freedom. It was as if collective guilt had turned into collective action. Psychologists describe something called de-individuation, when people in crowds lose their sense of personal responsibility. For years, that explained the paparazzi and the public. Surrounded by cameras, laughs, and gossip, individuals forgot Britney was human. She became a target, a symbol, a story to project on. But the same crowd effect that once fueled cruelty now fueled activism. People joined together, not to mock, but to protect. There was also parasocial attachment, the strange one-sided bond people feel with celebrities. Fans who had grown up with Britney's music felt like they knew her, as if she were part of their lives. That connection, once shallow, became a force. Instead of just watching her struggle, they began to speak as if they were her defenders, her friends, her family. And all of this unfolded in what we now call the attention economy. Every click, every hashtag, every viral video of Britney's court hearings turned into pressure on the institutions holding her. What once drained her life, the cameras, the constant exposure, now turned into the very thing that helped shine a light on her situation. Still, it's important to see what this movement revealed about us. The same culture that had fueled her suffering was now fueling her fight for freedom. For years, the public consumed Britney's collapse like entertainment. Now they wanted redemption. The reckoning wasn't just about her. It was about us admitting what we had ignored for too long. The Free Britney movement forced the world to confront a truth. Her story wasn't only about one woman's pain. It was a mirror of a society that had blurred the line between caring and consuming. And by the time her voice was finally heard again, it wasn't just her freedom at stake. It was a test of whether we could still recognize the humanity of someone we had turned into an image. When the noise finally shifted and the conservatorship ended, freedom didn't arrive like fireworks. It arrived like a quiet room. For the first time in years, Britney could choose simple things: when to rest, what to spend, who to trust. But freedom after long control is complicated. The body remembers stress. The mind remembers being watched. Even joy can feel strange when you haven't been allowed to feel it freely. This is the slow work that comes after survival. Learning how to live without performing for anyone but herself. For so long, Every choice was filtered through other people's rules. Now, the choices were hers, which sounds easy, but isn't. It means building new rhythms from scratch, waking up without a schedule set by others, creating because you want to, not because someone expects it. It means saying no without apologizing, and saying yes because it genuinely feels right. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl wrote that people can endure almost anything if they can find meaning inside it. Meaning isn't fame or approval, it's purpose, knowing why you wake up, even on the quiet days. For Britney, purpose doesn't have to look like stadium lights. It can look like health, safety, and peace. It can be time with people who treat her like a person, not a product. It can be creative work on her terms, smaller, slower, or simply different. Purpose after pain is not about proving anything to the world. It's about rebuilding a life that fits. Carl Jung spoke about integration, bringing the split parts of yourself back together. For Britney, integration means letting the performer and the person finally meet. The strong worker who can memorize every count and carry every show is still there. So is the human being who gets tired, scared, angry, or tender. Integration isn't a speech or a single moment online. It's hundreds of small choices. Resting when the body asks, setting boundaries when old pressures rise, and allowing real feelings to exist without turning them into content. Healing also means accepting that some things were lost. Years of control, trust in systems that failed her, pieces of normal life that should have been simple. Grief is part of it, but grief can sit beside growth. You can miss the time you lost and still choose how to spend the time you have now. You can remember the past without letting it define your next step. There's a different kind of strength in this season. Not the kind that fills arenas, but the kind that keeps a person grounded. It shows up in a calm morning, a private celebration, a decision made without asking for permission. It shows up when she shares what she wants and keeps what she needs to keep. This isn't a victory lap. It's a return to being human. No mask to hold up, no script to follow, no spotlight to feed. Just a woman learning the shape of her own life again, slowly, honestly, and on her terms. Britney's story was never just about her. It was about all of us. The way we confuse image for truth. The way we forget that behind fame is still a human being with fragile needs and real pain. Her collapse looked like spectacle, but it was really a mirror, showing how far we had drifted from empathy, how hungry we had become for the performance instead of the person. The truth no one wanted to see is that what broke Britney wasn't weakness. It was the weight of being turned into something less than human. And if that feels haunting, it's because the same world that consumed it, her, still surrounds us. We may not live under flashing cameras, but we all know what it feels like to perform, to hide, to carry an image instead of a self. Her journey back to freedom is quiet, fragile, unfinished. And maybe that's the point. Healing doesn't look like applause. It looks like authenticity, small, ordinary, real. So when you think about Britney Spears, don't just remember the collapse. Remember what it revealed about her and about us. A reminder to choose empathy over entertainment, to see the person instead of the performance. And maybe ask yourself, in a world obsessed with images, how often do you allow yourself and others to simply be real? If this story made you reflect, share your thoughts below. And if you'd like more stories that hold a mirror to the world we live in, subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us. Because the truths we avoid are often the ones we need most.